everybody. Welcome to Rachel's Reviews, and we are here for another female film critics panel, and I'm excited to have one of my Twitter friends with me today that we've gotten to know each other, and she's actually a patron of the podcast, so that's exciting. We have Rachel Masters here, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. This is really exciting.
Yeah, so this is your first time. Why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners and tell them a little about you? Also, you're a cinematographer, you're a photographer and a videographer. So tell us a little bit about what you do.
All right. Well, yes, my name's Rachel Masters, and I am a freelance photographer and videographer. I do travel photography for myself for my personal Instagram, and then I do freelance videography projects such as weddings and YouTube videos for different channels. And I've done some music videos for my friend who's a musician. And yeah, I got into it at a fairly young age. I was running around with a video camera since like age 11, and it just kind of took off from there. Went to film school.
Oh, so. You did? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny in Hallmark movies that if they want to give a character a creative hobby, or not even hobby, if they want to give a character creative field, 99% of the time they make them a photographer. It's like the popular thing. There's so many photographers.
There is so many.
If only the real world funded as many photographers as there are Hallmark movies.
Yeah, there are so many photographers. It is, you'd think it would be hard to stand out, but there are so many people who need photographers that somehow we all end up getting work. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Something
they're almost never though like school photographers or like wedding photographers. They're always like op-ed, nature photography, things like that. You're just like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, where the money is in the senior pictures, the family photos, and the weddings and engagements.
Yeah, but I think that would still be fun. I'm sure it gets old after a little bit, but it would still be fun to make those as good as you could. The challenge of it, especially weddings.
It's challenging to come up with a creative look for each wedding and not make it look like it's the same.
Right.
Happen, especially when it's in the same venue. I've shot the same venue like 3 times, and every time I'm like, okay, now how do I make this look like it was not the same wedding with just different people? So yeah, that's interesting.
But. Did you start out in like taking actual film and then move to digital, or have you always been digital?
It's always been digital. My degree is actually in digital cinematography, so I have never done film, even though that's something that I would really like to do. I would like to try my hand at, for sure.
Yeah, I was thinking about the other day that probably like one of the biggest cultural differences in my lifetime versus like my niece's lifetime is that you used to have to wait to see the pictures that you took. And there was always that, well, what if it gets exposed and then you wouldn't have any of them? You wouldn't have any pictures from your whole trip, or if they all just happened to be fuzzy, or like I had a trip to New York, every single picture that wasn't taken by me. So if I gave someone my camera, every time it was fuzzy, it was bad. It's like, but now you don't even have to do with that because you can look right away. And
exactly.
See.
And I think that, I mean, there's some pros and cons to that. For convenience sake, and practicality, I would say that digital is a lot better, but there's nothing like that film look though. And I think it's good to have the practice. I would think.
Yeah. Have you ever worked in a darkroom?
No.
Never done it ever?
No. Yeah. I would love to do that though.
Yeah. I took photography in high school, and we still had a darkroom in those days. I feel like I'm like a million years old, way back in 1998 when I was in high school. Yeah, we had photography, and my dad's actually he's worked as a professional photographer. My brother has done some as well. And my dad particularly like landscapes, because our family business used to own a company called Impact Photographics, which makes like the photographic memorabilia for the national parks.
Oh,
and,
wow.
so for like Bryce and, Zions and things like that. And so there's still at Impact Photographics some of my dad's photography and some of my grandfather's, and they all got all the Wagner men particularly got into it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So
Um,
we were never a family that was camera shy. That's for sure.
Hey, that's good because I have to
Yeah.
drag my family members in front of the camera half the time.
Yeah.
So, which is pretty funny.
Well, and what the funny thing too, though, is that my dad didn't want other people taking our family photos. And we're like a hard family to take a photo of because we have like, there's kind of two batches of us kids. So there were like the little kids and then us older kids. And so there's like all these different heights and all these different, stuff. So we would take these like amazing family photos of our friends and neighbors, and then for ours we would just be like in a line and he'd have his clicker. Our family photos were always terrible, and usually it was one with my mom had been working like the whole day, making, because it
Right.
was at an event of some kind or whatever, and so she was tired. And I was like, this is horrible.
It seems like
But
no one wants to be in the family
yeah,
photo when you're taking it,
yeah.
which is hilarious.
Well, I mean, it's like, they say the cobbler's sons don't have any shoes. It's the same thing, I think.
That's hilarious. Yeah.
But,
I would find that yeah, like half the family are like so extremely introverted that they're like, I don't want to be seen ever
yeah,
anyone. And then the other half, they're okay. And then you have that one extrovert that sees the camera and is like, hello.
yeah.
So
That was probably me or my sister Anna. It was definitely one of us. But uh, I noticed in your photographs that you use color and lighting in particular in a beautiful way, and I was impressed by that. A lot of blues, and was that something that you were attracted to, that you try to bring out in your photos?
yes, I'm very attracted to the saturation of like
Hmm.
nature. And it's kind of a thing in photography, or it was a couple of years ago, to make everything a little bit more desaturated.
Hmm.
At least on Instagram and the photography community on there, I was the
Yeah.
opposite. I was like, saturate all the photos. And so
Yeah.
I definitely lean towards that visually as a style. Blue
Hmm.
is my favorite color, hence, the background.
Yeah.
Yeah, blue has always been, since I was a little kid, it's maintained as my favorite color. And so I try to put that color in a lot of my photos,
Hmm. Yeah,
um, for sure.
I noticed that.
Yeah, I end up, my grid, that they call it the grid, is that like all those photos when you land on someone's Instagram page and you have like those 9 to 12 photos that are right there.
Hmm.
I'm kind of obsessed with it either being blue or being tilting toward more of like a golden light,
Hmm.
if you will, with like different portraits and
Hmm.
sunsets and stuff like that. So
Is that something when you're watching a film that you kind of notice, oh, they used that technique there? Because I know even watching Hallmark movies, because they use the bokeh a lot
yes.
in Hallmark movies, and if people don't know what that means. It's like when it it looks kind of like it's so soft and glowing that it looks kind of like little dots.
Mhm.
I don't know how to explain. That's what
Yes, yeah, that's when
they
the
love it in Hallmark movies.
lights in the background and it'll be
Hmm.
blurred out, but you'll have the light kind of shaped in the shape of the iris of the lens. So a lot of times you'll actually be able to see like how many blades that the lens has in the
Hmm.
iris because
Yeah.
of the lights. Sometimes you can even tell how expensive the lens is because of that.
Hmm.
The blade count. Um, Weird fact. Anyway, but they do use it a lot. And it is a nice look to have lights in the background and then have your subject in focus and have like these just like magical fairy lights.
Hmm.
It's a
Well,
really
especially
great,
during Christmas, because you got the tree with the lights, and so the bokeh look just like really pops.
really pops, really colorful,
Hmm.
multicolored lights. Yeah, for sure. I love that look. It's hard to try to find it a way to use it in a way that hasn't been used 100 times, but it is successful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you a fan of Rachel's reviews? Do you look forward to Family Movie Night, Female Film Critics panels, or the Talking Disney podcast? If so, please consider supporting the podcast by becoming a Patreon. As a patron, you get to access monthly events such as the watch-alongs and Q&As, where you get to talk to stars and find out the behind the scenes of the movie making industry. And you can pick what I review for Family Movie Night or even become a guest on the podcast. Podcasts and YouTube channels are expensive, and I really, really could use your help. I would so appreciate it. You also get to be a member of the Facebook group where we talk about all the films that we're seeing, and we have so much fun. Go to patreon.com/hallmarkies and select one of the Rachel's fan tiers. That's patreon.com/hallmarkies.
Yeah. I think of another one recent was, did you see Rye Lane, the rom-com Rye Lane?
No, I have not.
Oh yeah, it's good. It's a good movie. It is R-rated, but it's a sweet little rom-com. But they use fisheye a lot.
Oh,
That's a
wow.
very distinct color palette that she implies, and a very like unusual filming style.
Yeah, fisheye. That seems like it would be. That's very stylistic.
Yeah, it's
choice
very
because of
stylistic.
how wide that lens is, and so the distortion. I can see someone wanting to play around with that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it does add, because it's like it's indie. It adds an indie sensibility to what otherwise would be a somewhat conventional rom-com. They have
Right.
like their meet cute, and I mean it's unconventional in the sense that it's pretty strong R rating and pretty silly, but it still was very sweet in most other ways. But the filming definitely adds that, like, okay, I understand why this is at Sundance.
Right. Just doing something a little bit different.
It adds a Sundance cred to it.
Wouldn't that be amazing? Have a film in Sundance.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah, I know. It's kind of sad because Sundance has become so co-opted by the big names, your Netflix and your Amazon Prime in particular, that so I feel like the whole idea of, oh, I made a movie out of my van, with $10,000, like that kind of that old idea that Sundance used to be, is harder and harder to find. And so you've got to take some big risks, and you end up seeing some terrible films if you do that. But it can be very exciting when you find that, like, truly indie gem that you can find at Sundance. But a lot
That's
of them, like, because they have like the premieres, and then they have like the world. They have the dramatic and the documentary and the world premiere, and the premieres usually have already premiered at TIFF's, at Venice, it's at Cannes, someplace like that, and so those ones are safer, but like not quite as exciting when you find like a really great one. It's very exciting.
Yeah, I've only been to one film festival. It was back when I was a teenager, and it was pretty cool to just sit down and watch something. You have no idea what it is going into it, and
it's really fun.
And then you see some weird stuff too.
The
group I was with, we sat down to a real weird one, and we were like, okay.
Yeah, I saw one at Sundance a couple of years ago called We Are Zombies.
Oh my
gosh, it was truly bonkers. It will never get certainly not a wide, but it will never get a release. Like, it was definitely a unique to Sundance movie. You should look it up.
We Are Zombies. I'll write that down.
We Are Zombies. Yeah, it's about this, like, I'm trying to remember now what the plot, because it was so bizarre, but it's about this band in, I think, Korea, of teenagers in this band, and I don't even remember if there were zombies. I think that was the name of the band. But at one point they get shrunken down and ingested by by a character, and they get birthed out in this, like, crazy, I mean, this thing was nuts.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was really crazy. But that is part of the fun of Sundance, is is those kinds of experiences. You just have to
Yeah,
be like open to whatever they're gonna throw at you.
it's fun to react to strange things too, even as a group. You
Hmm.
look at each other, if you with
Yeah.
somebody, you're like, okay, I don't know what they were thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Do you remember the first films that really influenced you?
Oh goodness. I
Shaped your
always feel
taste?
bad because I feel like I'm playing favoritism. The first movie that I like remember watching that like had like an impact on me
Mhm.
was the Prince of Egypt. I remember my
Mm.
parents took me to watch that in theaters when it came out,
Yeah.
and
It's a
that blew
favorite of
my
mine
mind.
too.
It's amazing.
I love that
And
film.
I think the crazy thing is that no matter how many times I've watched it throughout my life, it's always had that same level of impact as when I first watched it. And there's not very many movies I can say that about, really.
Hmm.
Very powerful film.
Yeah.
And the one thing I would say is that if a movie makes you forget that you're watching it because you're so wrapped up in the story, I think that that's really when it's succeeded. And to me, I would say that The Prince of Egypt checks all those
Yeah.
boxes. And it was early enough in my life that I was like, I don't know, it was an experience that led to watching other movies that led to me saying, I want to be a part of this.
Yeah.
I want to make stories. I want to be behind the camera.
It's one of my favorites as well. I absolutely love everything basically about that. I can nitpick and say that the priests aren't the best. They're not my favorite, but I still absolutely love that film. And when he parts the Red Sea, it's got to be up there in my top 20 most powerful moments ever in film.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Mm,
I think the music
mm,
is so powerful too.
mhm,
And the people they had on board, was it Hans Zimmer did
mm,
the soundtrack for that, and then Stephen
mhm.
Schwartz did the lyrics.
Yeah, I think so.
But that movie just comes in and just gut punches you with that first number. Really shocking. Like I said,
Yeah.
every time I watch it throughout my life, it shocks me that it was even made. I don't even know
Mhm.
how that's possible.
Yeah.
Made, I think, at the perfect point in time in Hollywood's history, and I think in animation's history.
Mhm.
That
I
they,
know it bums me out that I just wish that had been the big success and that instead of Shrek. Do you think
Mhm.
like how much better would modern animation, although we're in a really good spot right now, but how much better modern animation would have been if Prince of
Mhm.
Egypt was the big hit and Shrek was the like mediocre success?
Right, right. It's so unfortunate because um I try I try to expand myself. I have a really hard time with Shrek and that type of
Mhm.
movie. It's still
Yeah.
funny. Like the first one
Yeah.
I've seen, it's pretty funny, but I have a hard time with that. And then people not preferring or leaning towards stuff like The Prince of
Yeah.
Egypt.
I know.
Makes
Like
me sad.
the first and second Shrek movies are fine, but they don't really have much staying power for me. They're like kind of one and done. Like, yeah, I laughed. It was fine. But I hated the third one so much. And I only recently watched the fourth one and it's okay. But like the Prince of Egypt is just on a different level.
Mhm.
It's really special.
I
I
think it's high
agree.
art.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah, that's why when some people were complaining, they're like, because when they part the Red Sea, you can see a whale in this ocean,
The best
and they're
part.
like, there's no whales in the Red Sea. I'm like, oh my gosh, wrong,
Some people are too literal.
right? Oh. Well, that one's a good one to be a really influential film. Did you grow up watching a lot of classic film? I know you're a big classic film fan.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'd grown up watching them like off and on during my childhood, but right when I was about 13, I started to become obsessed with them.
Mm-hmm.
I would watch TCM religiously, and I did a lot of babysitting And that's basically what I forced everybody to watch when we were babysitting, is classic movies.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I became obsessed with them, started making lists of all the ones I watched, doing like a little 1 to 4-star rating of them. I would write reviews and essays on them. And I carried that kind of throughout my life. So I think most of my like film knowledge would probably be in like the classic pre-1960s era. When I became an adult, I started to dive more into like everything made after that period of the 60s.
Mhm.
So I still kind of feel like I have a lot of catching up to do in terms of watching movies from the 70s, 80s, 90s, looking
Yeah.
at how everything progressed, because I was so focused on everything pre-60s.
I used to not watch rated R movies when I was an adolescent, and so that's a lot of my blind spots are that, like, people are like, I can't believe you haven't seen Raging Bull, or something like that, and it's like,
Right.
I didn't, because I just for so long didn't watch the R-rated movies, and so I've over the years been trying to catch up, but there's still, those are a lot of my blind spots are from that.
Yeah, I'm kind of similar in that, yeah, there were some movies that like growing up I just didn't watch. And then when I became, and I hit like 17, 18, I started to kind of branch out a little bit more. But there's so many famous movies from the 80s in particular that I'm just not familiar with, that, yeah, I'm playing catch up, trying to like dive into those films.
Yeah.
Specifically the ones that get like nominated for Oscars and stuff like that.
Although 80s is such a lame period for the Oscars, like almost all of them, except for Amadeus, are like underwhelming.
Right.
The Best Picture winners. I mean, movies like Terms of Endearment. Oh, I hated that movie just about as much as
Really?
any movie I've ever seen.
I kind of,
I couldn't
it's a
stand
painful
it.
movie. I think it's painful because it's so dysfunctional.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh. I hated all the people, and I just found it so unpleasant and just not
I
not
thought
for
that
me.
the Jack Nicholson and Shirley MacLaine, I thought their romance was kind of funny.
Mhm.
There was a part in it that made me just like die laughing. I think it was the part where they were they were at the beach.
Mhm.
They were at the beach and they're like having this like beautiful romantic moment, and then all of a sudden somebody does something that just totally like ruins it and takes them out of the romance of it, and
Mhm.
reminds them of like real life. I thought that was funny. But the movies, yeah, it's pretty dysfunctional, it's pretty painful. Not feel good for sure.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
agree, the characters are so off-putting that it's a little hard to enjoy for most of the movie, for sure.
Yeah. Well, what about you? What would you say a classic film that you think, I didn't love that?
Oh, like something that I think maybe is overrated or
Yeah.
a famous
Yeah.
one. Okay.
Classic.
I got into this conversation with somebody on Twitter. The Philadelphia Story.
Oh, okay.
I have a really hard time with that movie because of how the characters around Tracy are essentially blaming her for their flaws,
Mm.
or like, your reaction to my flaw makes my flaw worse, therefore all the bad things that have happened are your fault.
Yeah.
At least that's what I heard. I haven't seen it in a long time.
Well, I mean, I do kind of agree that I think it's a movie that you can only really appreciate on a very superficial level of just like, because if you think about it at all, these two people should definitely not be getting remarried, like at all.
Oh yeah.
It should not. And it's this, so you really, you cannot, you just have to it rides on the incredible star power, which is one of the best casts ever in a movie. But I do agree in that sense that like the characters' choices don't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting because I wanted to rewatch it because I had seen a clip of Greta Gerwig talking
Mhm.
about how she had based Barbie's character evolution off of Tracy from the
Mhm.
Philadelphia Story. And kind of just that character arc. of the character, like starting out being like really super perfect and then kind of unraveling and going through kind of an existential crisis. And I was like, all right,
Interesting.
yeah. I'll revisit to
Well, and
watch.
also the Jimmy Stewart character, he's literally just proposed to the Catherine Hepburn character. She's like, oh no, what's her name? She would be upset with me. And then he's like, oh, I guess I am in love with you. I'd be like, what?
Oh man.
I'm not your seconds. I'm not your second choice. But yeah, no, I think that's a fair one. A couple for me. I mean, there's quite a few actually, but I think that one of my, I guess, there are a lot of comedies that just don't really work for me that well. And in particular, I just didn't love the producers, the original producers.
Oh, right.
I don't know. I just didn't think it was, I felt like it was sort of a one joke movie.
Mhm.
I had one idea and I just didn't find it that funny. And it was just kind of annoying to me. I also don't love Some Like It Hot. And it's not like bad, but I just didn't think it was that funny.
I've never seen that.
Oh, you've never seen it?
I was actually going to start a series of videos on my YouTube channel of movies I'm embarrassed I've never seen, and then just do like a first time reaction to them. That's one of them. Mostly because I have a hard time watching Marilyn Monroe in movies. That's not a popular opinion.
I like her sometimes. Like I really like How to Marry a Millionaire.
Oh, that's great.
Very funny in that, playing this ditzy nerd was fun. So as far as I can like her, but
Hey, this is David from the Piecing It Together podcast, a podcast about movies and the movies that inspire them. For over 4 years, each week, a guest and I take a look at a new movie through the lens of what other movies we think were either an influence or connect in some other way. It's a fun, unique way to discuss films that leads to a great list of other movies to check out that either explore the same themes and ideas or maybe utilize similar filmmaking techniques. Including special episodes in our side series that twist the format, we've done over 200 episodes, so there's bound to be one on a film you've been thinking about and want to dig deeper into. So check us out on all the major podcasting apps and at piecingpod.com.
Well, so I have a blind spot series that I do once a month on my blog, and I'm coming close to actually my 100th post.
Oh, wow.
So I've been doing it for many years. And I have to say, like, the biggest misses for me have been particularly like comedies of the 70s and 80s. Almost none of them I've loved. I didn't like Lethal Weapon. I didn't like Beverly Hills Cop. I didn't like Slapshot. I just reviewed that.
I love Lethal Weapon.
No, I didn't like that at all. And it's a Christmas movie. I should like it. The comedy is just tricky. It's such a creature of the moment, I think, more than other genres.
Yeah, and I think everyone's sense of humor is so different, or like they're not necessarily like it's their taste in humor. There's some movies that like my friends will watch and they'll be like, it's hysterical. I'll watch it and be horrified and questioning a lot of things. But that one's hard. I found that like there's a lot of things that I watched from like the classic golden age era that I thought were funny when I was a kid or when I was a teenager that I do not think are funny anymore. And a lot of it has to do with sexist humor. I think that one, it's really easy for it to ruin a movie for me if there's like if it's pretty obvious that the people involved didn't really think much of women. So that's hard.
Yeah, that can be hard. What do you think is a classic that is underrated that you think deserves to be talked about more? I know it's hard.
That's a hard one. Like maybe not well known, or it just needs to be talked about more like some of the other ones that may or may not be talked about too much.
Well, I know one for me, and we reviewed this in the Criterion Project this year. It was To Be or Not to Be, or 1942.
That is
by Carol Lombard, Jack Benny. It is absolutely hilarious. I died laughing. And when you think of when it was made and how bold that was for them to like come out so against the Nazis when the war was still going on, and to just openly mock Hitler and all of that is like, it feels brave now. I can't even imagine how it must have felt in 1942. It was absolutely hilarious. I loved it. And I feel like that's one that hardly ever gets talked about.
I would agree with that. It seemed like the one that came out during that time that got most of like the attention historically wasn't it The Great Dictator with
Charlie
Charlie
Chaplin.
Chaplin? That because I think that actually caught Hiller's attention, didn't it? I can't remember.
Yeah, so that was 1940. So it was 2 years before this. And yeah, I think I think he was barred from going to Germany. It was like, yeah. So that was bold too. I mean, because
historically it gets all the attention, whereas like people forgot like To Be or Not to Be existed, it felt like, for a while.
Well, yeah, and like now it maybe doesn't seem as bold because, like, oh yeah, everybody hates the Nazis, of course, but like back then, you think that we were still at war. They were still occupying, Britain, and they could have won. And then, I mean, so that was pretty brave of them to put out this movie, and it was so funny.
Yeah, I would say that like movies that I feel like that catch my attention that I feel like need more attention are ones that don't feel old to me. Like a lot of times when you watch a movie from like, pre-60s, it feels very stuck in the era that it's in. And I feel like movies that transcend the moment in time they're in and talk something universal that feels like it could be taking place now, I think are the ones that we should all be like talking about and making the young people watch.
Yeah. I mean, that's what's great about a movie like The Apartment. Because even if people don't love that movie, I love it. But the themes that it's addressing are ever present. You're always going to have conflict with work. And what do I sacrifice for work? How much of my morals do I sacrifice for things to be easier, things that look easier? All of that, like really what Jack Lemmon's character goes through, and we just did a rom-com ranking over a classics rom-com ranking over at Hallmark's podcast, and we didn't include it. We didn't include The Apartment on the rom-com ranking because we're just like, it's barely a romance. It's about his not coming of age because he's a man, but him coming to know himself and kind of discover his integrity.
I would say it's kind of plays out sort of like an education plot, I would say.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating him knowing what he would do without caring about anybody else to have a little more convenience, a little more money. And that once he cares about someone and someone's at stake in his life, that what he's willing to give up.
Yeah.
Right. I find that to be really interesting.
Yeah.
But also he's kind of being called out a little bit on, like, I think some internal hypocrisy that all humans have of, it's okay for me to compromise myself, but I'm just especially devastated when this girl that I like compromises herself, as if she wouldn't be just like him and making the same mistakes that he would, right?
Well, that's when he finally realizes, like, oh, this is what I've done.
Yes.
Yeah, because all of a sudden it's not just nameless faces; it's real.
Exactly.
And but that temptation for the corner office is real and very tempting, and it seems so harmless to begin with.
Yeah.
Like who cares? He's not there. Like it seems like the only harm is him having to be outside.
Exactly.
In the cold.
Exactly.
Another one that I think deserves a little more love is a movie called I Remember Mama. Irene Dunne. I love the book. The book's called From Mama's Bank Account. It's this book about this woman remembering her mother, who was a Norwegian immigrant in like the 1920s, and it is funny and charming and just one of those movies that I feel like deserves to be in the conversation as a great classic, and I don't think you hear it talked about much.
Right.
I love it.
I was trying to think of a movie that I would say was underrated. I was looking over here on my shelf about one that I felt like needed to be talked about more. And I would have to say the one that I have two. One that I don't feel like is talked about enough is The Big Country. As far as like
Oh.
Western goes, that's one of
Mhm.
my favorite movies of all time.
Mhm.
And whenever anyone talks about Westerns, I never hear them talk about this movie. And it's like
Yeah.
a massive film.
I don't
William
think I've
Wyler
seen it.
directed. Oh, I would highly recommend it. Gregory Peck, Charlton Heston,
Oh, wow.
Burl Ives actually won Best Supporting Actor for his performance in the movie.
Mhm.
Gene Simmons, Carol Baker, and then Chuck Connors plays the villain in the movie, and it's pretty intense. And the overarching theme in it is different types of masculinity in the Old West, and you kind of have like the spectrum of like a gentleman to like a cowboy, and then you have like the different types of fathers present in this movie. It's really great. I would highly recommend it.
Sounds great. That sounds good. So do you have a cinematographer that's your favorite?
Oh boy. Well, one that's been my favorite since I was like a kid was Jack Cardiff. When I watched The Black Narcissus when I was actually pretty young, a little bit young to understand a lot of the themes that were going on in it, but I saw the way that movie was filmed and it captured my attention, and I was like, I need to know who did this, who filmed this movie. So I would say that he's definitely one of my favorites.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'd probably say Emmanuel Lubezki, even though I don't like the Inarritu films. I like his cinematography in them, and his Terrence Malick's films are just so beautiful. And I think the directors get a lot of the directors have gotten a lot of credit for his genius.
Right.
He finally got that, the Oscar he deserves. But he's great. I mean, of course, Roger Deakins is a legend. And
we'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/hallmarkies.
how do you feel about the current state of cinema? We have all these streamers, but everything's it's a mess streaming right now. But I still think that there's a case to be made that it's easier to find an audience and easier to get a film made than it's ever been. I mean, people are making films on their iPhones and stuff like that. But on the other hand, it's just with the state of what's happening with movie theaters and, like I said, with streaming being a total mess. How do you feel about it, where we're at?
Goodness. Well, am I allowed to include like TV series in that
Sure.
streaming series? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say it's like the best of times and it's the worst of times for sure. You have some of the best movies I've ever seen coming out recently. And then you have some of the worst movies that you've ever seen. You don't know how they're getting permission to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on these films. It really shocks me, actually, what you were talking about, but how easy it is to get a movie greenlit. Just based on, there was these films that were popular in this genre, and so we're going to give you X amount of dollars to recreate that, and then they bomb spectacularly, lose all this money. It's really shocking. I would say it's encouraging that you have movies like Oppenheimer, Barbie coming out, and you're able to make these fantastic films. one film that surprised me that it even got made and that it was made as well as it was, it's a few years back, is Dune. I was actually really shocked that we got a movie that good out of the current era, because everybody complains about new movies and how they don't make movies like they used to, and then they come out and make something like that feels like already an instant classic. So I'm pretty positive about it, because people are still getting the chance to make really solid films, even though there's always these really crappy films coming out at the same time. So I would say I'm optimistic. However, I think that I predict that we're probably going to hit disaster. I mean, we kind of already have with these strikes.
Yeah.
It seems like the executives in charge of making all the decisions have been making decisions that you're not sure someone with an average intelligence would actually make. There has to be some other reason why they would put people who are competent in charge.
The problem is that they were very myopic in their scope, because it never made sense to me of how are you going to be profitable when you charge less than one movie ticket for a whole month of entertainment in these very expensive properties. But from their perspective, they would basically rather have 100% of small pie than like 20-30% of large pie, which was the movie. I'm just making that up. But it was a lot smaller percentage of the big pie than the small pie. But then, so that's why they're digging in when it comes to these strikes, because now all of a sudden they won't have 100% of small pie. So the whole model starts to make a lot less sense for them. And so that's why they're fighting tooth and nail. And obviously they should share that small pie. But I think that what's going to happen at the end of this, I really do, is I think that streaming services are going to be way more expensive. I think that they're going to probably double. Almost all of them are going to go way up, because it just doesn't make sense. Like, how can you provide all of this entertainment and catalogs and everything out of entertainment for like under $20 a month? It just has never clicked for me. And so I think that would be my prediction, is that we're going to start to see prices go up a lot.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Everybody thought that they were going to come out and be able to do what Netflix did, but Netflix got to where it is, even though it was having trouble. But I think they're going to continue to sustain what they're doing, because they did it in a very specific way and they built it over years. Disney thought they could just come out and be Netflix with their own content, and it's failing miserably because the people in charge are not hiring.
And Netflix also had the luxury of being able to go for years and years with unbelievable debt, unsustainable debt.
Yeah.
And because they were able to keep the stock price up because they were seen as successful, then they were able to kind of ride that. And so that's something that not every new streaming service can do. And it's easier to do when you're one of the only games in town. But I mean, you've just seen it like Peacock, and I was just reading there that they lost it was insane, many billions of dollars last year. These streaming services are just bleeding money.
Yeah, I foresee a couple of them probably dropping their streaming services and going back to the point where they license it out, their work out to like maybe the big three.
Yeah.
And then go from there. I don't think that it's sustainable for them all to have this steady influx of like top tier content that they're just not getting the same amount of revenue for that they did with. I mean, everybody hates ads, but they're there for a reason. That's how they make their money. To get rid of ads. Not all of them have gotten rid of ads entirely, but
I know we were so lucky that the peak of streaming happened when we were all stuck inside for the pandemic. I mean, that was a real blessing that we got all of that that, I mean, I think a lot of us got through the pandemic with WandaVision and
Mm-hmm.
shows like that, Bridgerton.
Yeah, I think the key is hiring artists, showrunners with strong vision and passion about what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And not just hiring someone with no experience to go and run a big show with a massive budget that doesn't really care about the IP involved.
Mm-hmm.
It shocks me that quote from the showrunner, or I think it was from one of the directors of Secret Invasion,
Mm-hmm.
About like not needing to fulfill the fans' expectations. That's not what their concern
That's
was.
just stupid though, because especially with Marvel, because you're talking about an extended universe where it all connects. Like if it was a standalone movie, then of course it doesn't matter if it all connects because it's its own thing, and if the ending's disappointing. But like if an ending's disappointing in the MCU, it affects like a million other movies and the whole story. So that's crazy.
Yeah.
I didn't watch that, thank goodness. I haven't watched, I mean, I just don't have time for much television. So well, series.
Yeah, it's interesting. I believe that Secret Invasion, it was about, I want to say it was 6 episodes long.
Usually I'd watch the first 2 and then I just don't have time to watch the rest of them.
Yeah, well, I watched the first few, and this show, they spent over $200 million on this short limited run series. And you're wondering, you're sitting there, you're watching this show, which looks pretty modest. Where did they spend the money on? I mean, even the stars' salaries don't really take a big enough chunk out of the pie to warrant an over $200 million budget, when you have a show like, somebody had brought up on Twitter, that show like House of the Dragon looks like every dollar was spent on the quality that you're seeing on screen. Yeah, you're wondering where it all went with Secret Invasion.
Or even, I mean, that's not a TV show, but with I know that Sound of Freedom had its flaws, but the fact that it cost only $14 million, I think is super impressive. It looked really good. It looked like it had major money to me.
Yeah, well, even with A Quiet Place, I'm pretty sure that they made that, I want to say, for 15 million, 15 million, and they went and made like over 70 million back. They don't have to spend as much money as they do. I truly believe that it's just allocated badly on a regular basis. If they tried, I think they could get that number a lot lower, because we've seen it be done. Yeah.
Well, we already kind of talked about some unpopular opinions, but I always like to ask my guests, what's a project that you've done, whether a video you've made or maybe something you've done that you're proud of, you think was really good.
Well, I made a music video when I was still in college, where it was for my musician friend. He plays piano, he writes his own music. We took a piano out to the beach, to Rialto Beach on the Washington coast. And my family, they were really awesome. I told them what I wanted to do, and everybody banded together and we made it happen. And we took that piano in the back of the truck and dragged it out into the beach, got the permission of the National Park Service and everything. And I think it turned out in a way that, like, obviously there's some things that I would do differently, obviously, because I was a student at the time, but I'm really proud of the fact that we carried that idea through of taking the piano out and shooting.
That is cool.
And putting it to YouTube. So
did you get sand in the piano?
No, I mean on the legs, but no, I actually did pretty good.
That's good. That's cool. All right, well, we like to end with some fun get to know you questions. So first question is, what is the best ice cream flavor?
Peanut butter.
Okay, good. What is your favorite color? You already said.
Yes, blue.
Blue. Okay, what music are you into right now?
Ooh, I've been listening to Broadway soundtracks.
Yeah.
Mostly I've been listening to Sweeney Todd, actually.
New one?
The original.
Original, okay. So what is your go-to date night food if you were going to go on a dream date?
Ooh. I want to say tacos.
Okay. What would be your go-to dream date night activity if you're going out and doing something?
Talking about movies over a pint of beer.
Nice. Okay. Would you like better, dogs or cats?
Cats.
Okay. Would you like better, beaches or mountains?
Oh gosh. I'm gonna have to go with mountains, but I love them both equally.
Okay, great. What is your favorite holiday to celebrate?
4th of July.
Oh, nice. And what is your favorite Hallmark or romantic movie?
Oh goodness. Or romantic. Like
Mhm. Like a rom-com.
I'm gonna have to say You Got Mail.
Oh, love that one. So good. Very good. You did it. You answered all the questions. Thank you so much for coming and talking with us. And if people want to follow you and your content, how do they do that?
Well, on YouTube, I'm actually going to be doing a podcast called Film Fritter. That's just the channel name, Film Fritter, if they wanted to look that up, and keep an eye on that because we're going to be starting regularly outputting content soon. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I'll have that all in the description. I'll put the link in, and you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all over social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. Check that out. Also, make sure you're following also make sure that you're following Hallmarkies podcast. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. That really helps us a lot. And if you are watching YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. I'll have my playlist with all my female film critic panel episodes. Check that out. We also have the Patreon group, which is really fun. You can just be part of watch-alongs. You can be part of podcasts like this if you want. It's a great time. Please check it out. And then we have the merch store, which is also a lot of fun. So thanks so much, Rachel. It was great to meet you. And we'll talk to y'all later. Bye.
Bye.